I'd said that God's name was difficult to translate, that phrase, Etyeh, Esher, Etyeh. And that is because Hebrew doesn't have the sense of tense that English has. In Hebrew, you have action that's complete, and action that's incomplete, and action that's ongoing. And translators usually make determinations from context as to how to translate that, sometimes past tense, sometimes future tense, sometimes present tense, when trying to convey those thoughts into English. Just remember, we talked about translation, that translation is not code breaking. One thing that everyone agrees is that God's name does come from the Hebrew word to be. It is a form, the imperfect form of the Hebrew word to be. The reality is that word to be could be translated I was, or I am, or I will be, all of those legitimate translations of that text. W.F. Albright, a biblical scholar of some reputation, suggested actually that God's name was the causative stem in Hebrew. Hebrew has a stem that makes causative action, so you can guard someone or cause someone to guard. God's name could be the causative form of the to be verb. In other words, God is saying, I am the one who causes to be, or I am creator. So when God says, Etyeh, Esher, Etyeh, we really have a number of different possibilities for that translation. We have God saying it could mean, I was what I was what I am, I was what I will be, I was what I caused to be, or I am what I was, I am what I am what I will be, I am what I caused to be, or I will be what I was, I will be what I am, I will be what I will be, or I will be what I caused to be, or I will cause to be what I was, I will cause to be what I am, I will cause to be what I will be, or I will cause to be what I will cause to be. All of those legitimate translations. In fact, it's interesting. Some Bibles don't even translate it at all. The Jewish Publication Society, for example, just writes the English word Etyeh, Esher, Etyeh, and provides a footnote with all of those possible translations, telling you that God's name is bigger than we can imagine, actually. Names give insight into character. We know God exists, but pinning him down beyond that is kind of difficult. I've always sort of found some comfort in that we have a God who speaks to whatever your need may be. If you need to know that God exists, you can know that God is, I am that I am. Or that maybe you need to know that God will be faithful to you in the future. I will be what I have been. Would be a perfectly good translation of that as well. God's name seems to speak to all of our needs in those circumstances. But that are some of the hermeneutical difficulties when we look at the translation of this phrase that becomes so important, Etyeh, Esher, Etyeh. I think it's also interesting that name, Etyeh, that God gives him is in the first person. God says, I. But then when he gives the name to Egypt, or to Israel in Egypt, he conjugates it. He makes it third person. In other words, God says, I am. Israel says, he is. The word Yahweh, which we normally spell in English YHWH, is actually the third person. We've conjugated the name. I always thought that was funny. I had a friend in high school whose last name was Wint. We didn't call him Go when we talked about him in the first person, or in the present tense. We didn't conjugate his name, but God conjugated his name when he gave it to Israel. So some interesting thoughts about the divine name.